Easter was a blast last Sunday. Yeah? Anybody? Okay, cool. You have to say yes also. If you say boo, then we'll have a different conversation. I love what we do with the flowering cross. It's the opposite of the meme you might find. It's like Jesus goes and he comes out of the tomb, and then he goes to the place in which those who are following him are like huddled scared in a house, and he appears. And he's like, hey, what'd you guys come up with? And they're like, all right, check this out. We found this giant bunny, and he's going to go around and just, so like very quickly in our lives, Easter is like this idea of, hey, we're going to do this church thing and we're going to celebrate the resurrection. Then we also have like a lot of other things happening. And I don't know about you, but sometimes Easter can feel like an event. Like, okay, cool. That was last week. We did Sunday. He's risen. He is risen indeed. And then like, all right, let's jump into the next series and like kind of keep going. What's fascinating as we did the flowering of the cross, rather than an Easter bunny, the power of seeing something that's dead come to life, the imagery that flowering of the cross offers, I don't know about you, but does give me great hope, because there are things in my life that feel dead. There are things that feel like they're not the way they're supposed to be. There's things that are off and just miskiltered, like things are just not always alive. And so this is a great reminder that while there's death, while there's things that are stagnant, while there's things that aren't working in our life, we can still have hope, because there is life still to be had now and ultimately later. And in that, a big part of what we're doing is actually celebrating and identifying with the grace that God has offered us in and through Jesus. Now, for the church out throughout history, there's actually like a calendar for the church that some operate depending on the stream that you're in. It's called the liturgical calendar. And what that actually says is that since last Sunday, we're still in Easter. And Easter actually happens for 50 days, all the way up to what's called Pentecost, really just meaning like the 50th day. And it's this actually recognition of when the Holy Spirit fills the people in the book of Acts, and we are now filled and empowered by God's presence. So we celebrate Pentecost Sunday, 50 days after Easter. So right now, we don't just find ourselves in just the random musings of the week or the months. We find ourselves still in Easter. We find ourselves still sitting with the reflection on the power of the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus, and therefore the impact it could have on our lives. Paul, an early church leader, ends up writing this in Ephesians 2:8-9, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." Now, this idea of grace that has saved you and I don't know about you, but I tend to do a lot of saving for myself. When things aren't right, when things are good, I will find the way to save this. I will find a way to save myself, maybe even try to redeem or cover up my mistakes so that I still look good or have an image. I wonder for you, like, what are the areas in your life while we look at this free gift of grace that God has offered us, where are you still working for things? Where are you still working for your own identity and your own sake of purpose and love? Where do you not actually feel a sense of freedom in your life? Where are insecurities most high? Where does shame actually have like a grip on your life because of the things or the thing that you have done or do, to where you actually feel unloved and as if your secrets are too bad for other people? Where are you lacking freedom in your life? Because if we're celebrating Easter and we're still in it, we're still saying that that stuff actually has been gone under with Jesus, has actually hung on the cross, been buried with him. And as he came out, we now accept a free gift of grace so that we can have life. And Jesus comes and he says before this that I have come so that you may have life, and you may have life to the full. But I know right now you have areas in your life that do not feel alive. There are things that you do not have hope in. There are things that are weighing on you that keep you up at night. There are things that are pressing upon you, and what only seems to be coming out is like stress and anxiety and frustration and resentment. So what do we do with this juxtaposition of coming off of Easter? I don't fully know, but I'll attempt at a couple of things over the next few weeks. But I invite us to keep thinking about that Easter was not a one-day event, and then you and I continue to find a life of walking with Jesus, who has risen from the grave and offered you and I life, motivated by God's love for you and I, and extended through God's hand of mercy in what we call grace, and grace is a gift. Now, what's interesting is that there's a mid-century pastor that's put it this way: it is therefore faith alone which justifies, and yet the faith which justifies is not alone. If you've done church at any point, or if you've read the Bible, you've read a theology book, there's always this idea of like, well, is it just faith that saves us, or is it like the things that we do and the works? Like James seems to talk more about works, and well, if I need to like actually prove my faith by doing good things, and well, what if you can't do good things? And what he's saying is that faith alone justifies you and I. Like God's saving grace is the thing that makes us right with him. It's not your rightness, it's his. It's not your goodness, it's his. It's not your works, it's his. But at the same time, like that saving faith is not by itself. Like there's actually something that starts to take hold in our lives that starts to change. Hopefully we start to change. Hopefully the way in which we view the world starts to change. Hopefully the way in which we participate towards others, the least of these, those that we don't like / hate, those that don't like us / hate us, like our enemies. Like it actually starts to change the way in which we operate in a world that we don't fully know how to operate in. But I don't know about you, I tend to want to get to work and fix the things and feel like maybe things aren't set right and I have to go on and fix them. The bad news, I think, for anyone that likes to operate like me, maybe the good news for anyone who likes to put their feet up and things will sort themselves out. Richard Foster says, indirection affirms that spiritual formation does not occur by human effort, but through a relational process whereby we receive from God the power or ability to do what we cannot do on our own effort. Other words, the things that power you and I towards change, we ultimately don't have control of. It is the grace of God that you and I can become more beautiful and good and kind and righteous, less anxious, less worrisome, less fear-driven. We can't just wake up and be like, I'm just not going to be scared of this today. I'm going to be so happy at everybody. And then like you get cut off to work and there went that. Like, have you ever just tried to muster these things? Like, you can see the things that you want to change. You can see the things around you. You can see the things in the life of others, but you just can't. You don't have energy for it. You don't know how. And sometimes when you try to fix things, you actually end up making it worse. Is that just me? I'm like, oh no, I'm super anxious because this thing's happening. I better go and solve it. And then I go to try and solve it. It doesn't go the way I thought it was going to go for me to solve it. And now I'm back to square one and things actually got worse. But there's this way that God has broken into your life, and he's offering you change. And you can't muster it up. You don't have energy for it. You don't know how. It's his free gift of grace towards you. But what you can do is you can make space for it. You can actually offer yourself to the Lord over and over again and say, God, I want change. God, I open myself to your life. I open myself to your ways. I open myself to your spirit, and I receive your grace. I receive the grace that I need because I can't seem to do the things that I need to do. And I don't know about you, but that is good news. So what we're going to do over the next few weeks is, I guess, this big question of, do you need a change of grace? The things that you're trying to fix, the things that you find broken in yourself or around yourself. The question is, do you need a change of grace? Because it's this grace that actually starts to demonstrate the formation and the change that you and I so desire, that oftentimes is the change that we oftentimes don't even know about. Part of what we do in the 2-day intensive of Emotionally Focused in a few weeks is actually help us become aware of the things of the past that are keeping us stuck that we may not even have an idea about. But it's keeping you stuck. And then we start to develop and form tools that will help pull out of it that are all centered on Jesus. But this is actually a way of you and I considering, can I continue to be open to and press into the grace that we just celebrated last Sunday? Doesn't that feel like a long time ago? The reality is that it's a constant continuation. Easter is technically every single day because you and I need grace. See, when Caitlin and I got married, I believe that it was a day of God's grace upon us, that this is a gift in marriage, and my God, did we need grace? And guess what? Today, we still need just as much of that grace, if not even more, like 12 years later now. And we can try to figure things out and fix it and become the best for each other and all this stuff, but like really what we need grace to change us. We need to receive grace from God and the things that we can't change. We need to extend grace to one another as we continue to walk out and just run into each other and into ourselves over and over again. See, grace is the thing that justifies, yet it's the thing that you and I continually need over and over and over again. And what I want to talk to you about today is one of these changes that I think grace can empower to is a life of integrity. That one of the demonstrations that we celebrate the resurrection, that we're saved by grace, is that over time, you and I are opening ourselves up to a life of integrity. Not a life of perfection, I'll say that on the front end, but that you and I are opening ourselves to a life of integrity. Can you imagine a world in which people did the things they said they were going to do in the ways in which they said they were going to do it? Imagine that. Leaders, systems, politicians, parents, kids, gosh. Like, could you imagine that world where everyone just did the thing that they're like saying they're going to do? Because I mean, I think most people have very good intentions, but we have really poor follow through. Can you imagine how much like change would happen in our world? So the reality is that we could look outwards and think of all the ways in which we wish others were integrous or other ways of integrity, but I want to invite us to start with ourselves. And for a second, we're going to step into the shoes of the Pharisees. Jesus is hanging out. Matthew records this talk. He's talking to a bunch of people. He's also talking to the Pharisees, which were the religious leaders at this time. They're the ones who knew all of the law. They were the ones that were astute and could puff their chests up because they had all the knowledge. They knew everything from right and wrong. And it goes like this. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sat in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you, Jesus says. You can imagine the Pharisees standing there like, yeah, you guys heard him, right? You guys heard Jesus talking about us. You guys listening to what we have to say? Because Jesus seems to think that you should be listening to everything that we think. The Pharisees are feeling pretty good about themselves. And then Jesus says, but do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. And they're like, wait, hold on, what? Is he talking about us? I thought you just told them to like listen to us. We don't practice. What do you call when someone doesn't do, when they don't practice what they preach? What do you call that? Yeah, hypocrisy. He just bold-faced, like right in front of them, just calls them complete hypocrites. The religious leaders of this time. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. All on complete display. You can know all the things, you can say all the things, you can posture for all the things, yet you can do something completely different. You can be one thing on the inside and you can be one thing on the outside. You can say you're going to do something and you don't do it. You can teach a lot and have all the right information, and doesn't that just put heavy loads on other people that can actually feel lesser than you, yet you don't actually follow through on the things that you teach? Like the lack of integrity, that, I don't know about you, but that feels more like the reality that we find ourselves in a lot, often. Yes, in church too. And I know that you and I want integrity. Integrity is simply the word integer, meaning one or wholeness. It just means that it's not separate. Like everything is tied together in the same way, and there's one thing that represents the truth or the fullness of. And I know you want integrity because, like me, I want integrity. I talked to the city last week of Fresno, and I arranged for them to do a special haul, which is on their website, where you pay them a few extra dollars to come pick up something like a couch. And they have all the rules of what you can and cannot put out. And hey, you got to put it out at 6 a.m. the day before, because they come by and they test or they check like, okay, cool, it's just a couch, it's not illegal dumping, all this kind of stuff. And they come the following day. And so Caitlin and I are up at about 5:45 a.m. on Monday, and we're moving a couch out to the street. And I'm like, this is great, it's going to be gone tomorrow. And this thing that doesn't look terrible, but Rats got in it at one point. Kids got to it a lot. And then we try to clean this couch with water. It makes it worse, apparently, and you can't undo that. So it's out there. They're supposed to pick it up Tuesday. Wednesday arrives. The couch is still out there. You call them. It's this answering machine where it might take them 5 days to get back to you. So you leave a very kind voicemail, and you call them again the next day, and your voicemail is a little less kind. Because then they also had on their website, if it took more than 5 or 10 minutes for them to pick up the thing from your, it was just more of a load than they thought it was, then like you pay more money for that. So then my next voicemail was like, hey, by the way, you guys were gonna charge me more, but like, does that mean I'm gonna get money back because it's longer than, I'm just justifying all the reasoning of why it should cost me less now to do this. But what ultimately I'm upset about is like a lack of integrity, right? Like at the end of the day, I'm saying, look, I did my piece. I did what I was going to do. I said I was going to do. I did it, and I did it in the manner in which it needed to be done. And then on the other end, they didn't held up their part. It was a lack of integrity. Now, I know we're talking about a couch with the city who did eventually come on Friday, and I had to help them load it and all the things that was not a part of the plan, and it was great because it's gone, and it was kind, and it was wonderful. But like, where in your life is this really a big thing? Like, what are the things in the relationships around you in which you've said that you're going to do a certain thing in a certain way at a certain time in the manner at which it was supposed to be done? And you haven't. Maybe you committed to being someone who was going to be a certain person at certain times in a certain way. You're not doing that. What do we do? Because I know, like my life, you have areas like this. As an employee or an employer, as a spouse or a dating partner, as a parent or a son or a daughter, as a neighbor. Like if you think about your life, where are the areas in which you have said some things that you're not following through on? And here's why this really matters, and why I think it's worth us considering. Is because for us to live an integrous life, I think it actually is a demonstration of the grace that we've received in Jesus. And I'll walk that out in just a quick couple minutes here as we wrap up. But for you and I to live an integrous life, it's actually you and I saying that we've received grace in our life. So integrity in short form. Do we have that one, Blake? And I'll come back to this one real quick. Do we have the integrity definition? Just to see it real quick. You've heard me say it. Doing what you said you would do when you said you would do it in the manner that it was meant to be done. Cumbersome but clear. Are you doing the things that you said you're going to do in the way in which they're supposed to be done? And or the way in which they were requested by somebody else? And integrity matters because like right now, you appreciate the integrity of these chairs. It'd be very painful if this chair lost integrity. You love integrity when you go to the restaurant and you order food and you don't see what's happening back there in the kitchen, and you want to believe that they're doing the thing that they're supposed to do according to labor laws and food health and safety. And when you drive over a bridge, we've seen that in the news, like the integrity of a bridge, like these things really, really matter. And you expect integrity of others just like I did of the city. And man, is it infuriating when other people don't have integrity. So do you have integrity? What's the way in which you can have more integrity? So the reality is here, Jesus goes on. And before I read this, I do want to say that to live a life of integrity, there's a cost to do what you ought to do. Because right now, especially when you think of an area in which you have not been integrous, what it does is it asks you to go back. It asks you to receive grace, to go back and say, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't do the thing that I said I was going to do in the time in which it was supposed to be done, in the manner in which I said I was going to do it. That's hard. That's really hard because it admits fault and guilt and that you weren't right or that you messed up. And what you're doing is you're practicing the grace that you've already received from Jesus. That's how integrity actually starts to display that you and I, who have accepted the free gift of grace in and through Jesus, that we're actually being transformed by the grace that he's offered us, not just celebrating it on Easter. That we're opening ourselves over and over again to say, I'm already forgiven. I've already received grace. I can press into this openly and process through this in a way towards reconciliation to where I can't control other people and their integrity, but you know what I can do is I can do the thing of integrity. And what we can then do is we can work backwards, because I don't think integrity is doing everything right. I think it's actually most often going back and owning up to the things that we haven't done right. That's a life of integrity in Jesus. So for you and I sitting right here and thinking of the ways in which we have boldly messed up and not been integrous in our life, the good news is grace. That we're not sitting here in shame or guilt or despair. We're saying, man, what an opportunity for me to put on display the grace in which I've received in Jesus. And when people ask you, man, why did you just do that? You came back and you're going to own up to that? That's rare. That's something that actually stands out, and you can say, yeah, I've already received the grace I need in and through Jesus, and I want to make sure that we're good, because Jesus has done the work for him and I to be good, and he wants us to be good. And so right now, there's actually an opportunity for you and I to press into the grace that we've already received. I asked Stephen Howe if I could share this story, because I think it matters, and he said no, so I'm going to share it anyways. Just kidding, he said yes. It was late last year, and Stephen has spent a lot of time over the last couple of years developing any of our online and digital stuff, and the way for those of you who are online right now can actually participate when on the road, and has put endless time in and streamlined things and made everything so efficient. I don't know if you know, but like everything, like if something breaks on a Sunday morning, it's the technology. So like that's just always happens in the background. Well, Stephen, we're talking through all this stuff, and I think it was like last November or so, and we're talking through moving to this church online platform, and he says, hey, really quick, can I talk to you about something? And I mean, you guys know, when someone says they want to talk to you about something, you're like, oh, shoot, what's the bad news? But he says, hey, I just wanted to have a conversation to own up to the thing that I said I was going to do that I haven't done yet. And I was, oh, fill me in. He's like, well, a couple months ago, I said that I was going to spend time on transitioning this over, and the reality is that I haven't done it. What was the impact on you? And if you ever try this, you'll most often find that people are like, oh, I didn't even think twice about it. Like it's, and we usually carry the thing more so on our side. But I was able to say, man, honestly, like not a terrible impact, but I really appreciate you bringing this up to me. And then he's able to work to the next step of actually like coming in tune with the impact that it could have had, where I could be like, actually, honestly, man, like I did expect you a couple months ago to start this, and I haven't known how to be able to have the conversation, and I feel like I've been resenting you, and blah, blah, blah. I could have gone down like the whole thing if that was true. And then what he does is he has an opportunity to repromise. Hey, I want to be a person of my word. I want to have integrity, and I want to repromise that I'm going to get this done in this amount of time, and I'm going to see it through. And he very shortly afterwards did that. But you know what I walked away with? I didn't walk away with being like, man, Stephen really let me down over these last couple months. Or, wow, how irresponsible is he? Or whatever it is. What I walked away with is like, man, how integrous that was. Like how courageous that was. How grace-filled that was. I was impressed. So the thing that oftentimes keep us from doing this work is this idea that I'm not good, or I can't, or they're going to be disappointed in me. And yeah, maybe, but we can't control the response of other people when we press into a life of integrity that's empowered by God's grace for us. Walked away being like, man, what an absurd amount of grace that Stephen just practiced to have a courageous conversation around living into a life of integrity. And what that could look like for you and I is simply those 4 steps. And this is the cost. We actually have to acknowledge that we haven't done the thing that we said we were going to do in the time in which we were going to do it, in the manner in which it needed to be done. Can you acknowledge that? That's painful. Because what you're saying is, I didn't get it right, I messed up, I dropped the ball, whatever it is, that's just uncomfortable and painful. There's a cost to doing this, to receiving the grace of Jesus and pressing into integrity. And then we actually get present to the impact. We don't assume what we did wrong or what the other person's feeling, we ask. We actually say, how did that make you feel? How did you experience me in that moment? How did this cause a rift between you and I? And then we listen to them say it. And usually it's something completely different than we were going to think. It might hurt more than what we were going to think, but we cannot actually apologize until we understand the impact in which it has caused. And then we say, now I apologize because I know what to apologize for. And I don't apologize for all the other things because I can't apologize for those if they weren't actually an impact. I apologize for what the person just shared in regard to the impact that it had. And then I repromise and I say, man, I want to be a person of integrity. I actually want to demonstrate a life of Jesus through an integrous life. That doesn't mean I live a perfect life. It means I go back to the things to reveal the integrity that I can live into that demonstrates the power of grace in my life that I've proclaimed that I've received. And that's the good news of Jesus, that you and I over and over again, we can continue to receive the grace. And the good news is because we need it. I'm so thankful because there's daily and weekly opportunities. I had one this week that I worked through. I had committed to helping someone see something through, to connect with someone else, and I was supposed to relay some information, and I left a piece out, and I went back. And before I went back, I was like, oh, I could just copy and paste, and I could put in that I actually did the thing. Like, I could save myself here. I could make sure that I don't look like an idiot and that I didn't let someone down, but that's just a further lack of integrity. But it took a moment to be like, oh, frick, is he going to be disappointed in me? I don't want to I just did the whole thing. And then eventually I was like, God, just do it, man. Like, you're good. God will take care of these things if you just continue to. So I just did it. I was like, hey, I let you down. I thought the information was in there. I completely missed it. I'm sorry. How does that impact you? Shares. Great. Now I'm actually going to see this thing through in the way that needs to be done now. And we're fantastic. We laughed and had a great conversation afterwards. It was wonderful. Can you imagine though, if everyone did this? Could you imagine today if you got out of here semi-depressed about a life of integrity and then call somebody and be like, hey, I don't know if you knew it, but I was supposed to do that thing. I didn't do it. What was the impact? Repromise. What if you did that every week? I know you have opportunity to, if not daily. That's okay. Because what we're doing is we're demonstrating to the rest of the world that we live by the grace of Jesus. I'm going to invite the worship team up as I close out with just one more thought here. A big piece of this. They've given a practical step: acknowledge, get present to the impact, make a heartfelt apology, and repromise. The reality is, we do need to stand with the psalmist here, who in Psalm 16:8 says, I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. There is something here that in order for us to do this well, we have to keep the Lord in front of us. And I know that can sound kind of churchy, just keep the Lord in front of you. But really, this is why Easter is longer than just a Sunday. Because it's to keep this idea that God has broken into your life and mine, no matter how far off, and has extended us grace and power, just motivated by his love through his hand of mercy towards us, to receive this life of integrity even when we can't do it on our own. Even when we don't deserve for someone to accept our apology and to continue walking with us even after we repromise. There's much of this that does not work without a grace-filled presence of God. We have baptisms next Sunday, and some of you in this room are being baptized, and there might be one or two more, and what we're demonstrating in and through the waters is that I have died to myself. I have laid my old self into the waters of baptism, going down in the tomb with Jesus, and I'm coming out in new life. And a part of what we're saying is I've received the free gift of grace in my life. And one of the ways that I open myself out to that is to actually try on the practices that form my character by his Spirit. And one of those is living a life of integrity. Man, does it have cost to do what we ought to do. But I just don't know another way that's more powerful. For you and I to be people of integrity, and when we don't, we go back and we be people of integrity. And when we don't, we go back and we be people of integrity. Do you see it? Can you imagine? Just imagine for a second, if everyone in your household did this, your roommates did this, your class did this, your workplace did this, your family, go on and on. If you're more curious of the ways in which integrity you're aware of in your life or not aware of, again, emotionally focused here in a couple weeks, I really do believe it helps reveal a lot of these things that we're not aware of, so that we can better invite in the grace of Jesus to transform us. And I want Midtown to be marked by people who aren't perfect or get everything right all the time, but can be marked by integrity. Because that is something worth proclaiming, that shines a light in our city that others are attracted to because you and I are attracted to it. Can we do more of that? Why don't we stand?